And we're live. Hi, everybody. This is Brandon.
This is Jake.
And we're chomping on donuts. Donuts are pretty good.
I love those. I already chomped on mine, but
yeah,
it was delicious.
You were ahead of the pack. No, so we didn't record last week.
We did not.
Figured we'd get on the ball today. Now, before we started recording, I asked you if you heard anything about the stuff going on with Chris Hardwick.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. You said that, and then you started recording a podcast, and I was like, when are you going to tell me about this Chris Hardwick stuff? So I guess this was your plan was... sorry, I'm getting my drink. Yeah. Was to talk about it on the show.
Yeah, I figure...
So let's talk about it.
I figure if you didn't know much about him, that it might be a good idea for us to educate everybody else in the timing, rather than educate you a couple seconds before we start.
Sure.
Yeah.
This makes sense.
Right. So Chris Hardwick, we're going to jump back in time. Chris Hardwick became famous as the host of Singled Out on MTV back in the day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. For years ago.
Singled Out? What was that? Like, wasn't that the Jenny McCarthy thing?
Yeah. Started off as a Jenny McCarthy thing, and then Jenny McCarthy left to go get naked, and then Carmen Electra came in.
I don't even remember. Like, I just remember it was like one of the first like dating shows, but I don't even remember like the format or anything. Like for some reason in my brain right now, I'm imagining like a bunch of women in bikinis just like walking across the stage, and then the guy would be like that one or something, and then they would go out on a date or something. I don't fucking...
Yeah, no, the one person they if I remember correctly, the one person they were trying to find a date for would basically come up with criteria. And you know the game Guess Who? Like, does your person have a beard? Whatever.
Right.
Whoever was sitting in the chair would basically call out shits like, I'm not really a fan of brunettes, so all the brunettes gotta go. And then Chris Hardwick would take all the brunettes and parade them in front of the dude, and they'd be like, you could have had me, and they'd keep walking. and he'd go, oh no, this sucks. And then they'd go on to the next question or the next criteria or whatever.
Right.
Until they whittled it down to one girl for the guy or one guy for the girl, whatever. And basically the guy'd be like, all right, yeah, you're the last one here. I pick you. Do you pick me back? And then that's when she'd be like, now I've seen you, no thanks. Or be like, I'd love to go out on a date with you. And then they'd live happily ever after for the weekend, and then they'd never talk to each other again.
Yeah, no. Okay, so now I know the show. I mean, it was no Room Raiders, but, you know. It was a
Get out of my face with Room Raiders, man.
Dude, I used to watch that, like, when the marathons would come on. I'm not doing anything this day, you know, like, this is what we're doing.
Right. No, that was, I think that started... I want to say either my sophomore or junior year in high school.
Yeah,
and I'm surprised it lasted as long as it did.
Dude, there was like a Room Raiders 2.0 and stuff. Anyways.
Yeah, so, yeah, it wasn't no Room Raiders, I'll give you that. Now, with that, though, so Chris Hardwick became famous as the host of Singled Out. And then once Singled Out kind of faded away, he was a comedian before that.
Right.
And once Singled Out went off the air, he went back to just doing the stand-up thing. He'd audition for a couple shows here. He was on a couple pilots, couple shows here and there, but for the most part, it was just stand-up for the longest time.
Right.
He's had an online presence, like with social media and stuff like that, as far back as I can remember.
Yeah, I don't know.
Whenever he was always one of the first people on like the technology front, I suppose. Big nerd, big geek, however you want to refer to him. Nerd is probably the go-to. But then he started Nerdist Industries, which they've
I mean, it'd probably be like an insult if you called him a geek, huh? Since he's
right, exactly. right.
Take that, you dork.
It's not,
you know?
It's not geekist, you know. That just sounds dumb. But he started Nerdist, and then with that started his podcast, the Nerdist podcast with Chris Hardwick.
Right.
And then that got pretty big. They're into like 900 episodes now.
Jeez.
Right. So
I mean, we're at like what, 300 or 400?
Easy, man. Easily. But no. So recently, or after the last couple years, he's blown up. He's
for sure.
Kinda, he's jumped in. He's doing like panels at San Diego Comic-Con.
Okay.
He hosts the Talking Dead, which is the Walking Dead after show, like where they recap with celebrities and stuff like that. So he's doing that whole thing. He's got a show on AMC called Talking with Chris Hardwick, where it's not even about Walking Dead. It's just him interviewing somebody like he would do on his podcast,
right?
But in front of a studio audience. Now with that, here we are today. About a month ago now, his ex-girlfriend Chloe Dykstra got online onto her personal Medium account, which is like a blog site.
Okay.
And she wrote this whole blog about a past abusive relationship. She never goes on to mention Chris Hardwick by name, but all signs point to she's talking to him or talking about him. Like I said, never mentions him by name, but says stuff like, he went on to be a relatively successful podcaster and this and that, and she worked for his company. Everybody's assuming Nerdist, that kind of thing. Never says Nerdist by name either. Never says Chris Hardwick by name. But
she gives us enough clues to make you think that it's him.
Yeah, you read between the lines. It's like, come on,
Did she say like what kind of abuse?
Never mentioned. I don't believe anyway. Never mentioned like physical, like he'd beat her or slap her around or anything like that. But
no sexual.
She says that he would work during the day, so when he'd come home at night, he'd expect her to be there and ready and waiting for sex.
Oh,
like stuff like that. And like from the time that they started dating, talking, whatever, he had a list of rules for her. Like, I'm a former alcoholic, so if you're going to be with me, you can't drink anymore. That kind of thing. And this wasn't like a year in, he's like, I've got a list. If you want to stay with me, this is what, no, this is like first or second date in. And he's like, hey, if we're going to be together, these are the rules you need to follow. And she's like, okay. And the relationship lasted for 3 years after that.
Yeah, I think, so as somebody who has also, struggled with that kind of stuff, I've had those same, not quite that strict, right? But, that kind of stuff, I don't feel, like, to me, that doesn't seem abusive to, like, lay down some ground rules and say, like, hey, you don't have to be with me, but if you are, like, these kind of things are important to me, etc. Might have never been that strict. It's more been like, hey, I don't even mind if you drink around me, but don't ever offer it to me.
Yeah.
Don't let me drink if I say that I want to. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And like my biggest rule was always don't bring it in my house. Like I don't care what you do outside of my house, but like this is my house. I pay for it. I don't want to be tempted by it, so just don't bring it. And I had a roommate even who we had friends come over, and she's like, "Oh, do you mind if they bring wine?" I was like, "Well, I just don't feel comfortable, you know.
Yeah.
Like, if they want to, like, have it outside and drink outside, up to them." But
yeah, no, I completely agree.
but I guess like I don't see, but like saying like I expect you to be like ready to have sex with me when I get home. That's pretty abusive, you know. Like,
yeah, no,
that
I agree. That's I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that being abuse. I could see that being like definitely a dickhead move. You know, I expect you at home and ready and waiting for sex, that kind of thing. It's like if he shows up at home and you're not ready for sex, does he hit you? Well, none of that was mentioned. It was just this is what I expect. It's like, okay, well then, yeah, it's definitely a dickhead move.
Like,
but
it's
I don't
mental
know.
abuse at the very least, because you think, like I personally think it's probably both, because what if she doesn't want to have sex? You know, like you're taking her choice out of the equation, right?
Yeah.
But also like just probably the anxiousness of being like, I don't want to have sex, but what's Chris going to do if he comes home and I'm not ready to have, I don't want to have sex.
Yeah.
And I tell him and he says, look, I told you what that kind of stuff. That, you know,
well,
it's
then
crossing the line.
I could see that then, yeah. With that, so far she's, as far as I can tell, she's the only former girlfriend or girl that's come out and said anything bad about Chris Hardwick or said anything like this about him.
Right.
So, and not to say, well, I need to see more girls come out and say that he's a dickhead. Like, no, that's not it at all, and not to discredit her story, but at the same time, you know, I very much lend it to there's his side, her side, and the truth. You know? And so far, all we've heard is her side. Like, just out of the blue, she goes and posts this blog, and it just so happened to be on the cusp of like her new movie coming out, like a movie she's in. So a lot of people are attributing it to trying to get publicity for a movie and that kind of thing.
So she's an actress?
Yes, yeah. He is a comedian and hosts a bunch of stuff. She, a lesser known, honestly, lesser known actress, has done stuff for, I believe, other than Nerdist, she's done stuff for like G4, and a big gamer, goes to conventions and stuff like that, does cosplay and all that.
Right.
But, yeah, honestly, her being lesser known than he is, she also mentions the fact that once they broke up, he went out of his way to blacklist her. Like, tell his friends and coworkers not to hire her for stuff and all that, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So far, I haven't seen any proof of that or heard any stories like that come to light where it's like, yeah, then he actually did that. This is just, so far it's just her saying this.
Right.
These are accusations. Now, with that being said, from her accusations, almost immediately, Nerdist Industries kind of wiped him off their website. Like, wiped any mention of him, any history of him off the website, and was like,
Chris Hardwick?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they're like, because Nerdist got bought out by Legendary a couple years ago.
Who owns Legendary?
I'm not sure.
Are they a podcast group or?
No, it's a separate company.
Okay.
Legendary Pictures, I believe.
The name sounds familiar.
Yeah. But
owned by like Fox or Disney or somebody probably.
Maybe. But with that, Nerdist wiped Chris Hardwick from their website, so there's no more mention of him on the website.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we do not condone stuff like that. Blah blah blah. We're going to be conducting our own investigation. Blah, blah, this and that. Blah blah blah. Moving forward. and then AMC